that was probably my favorite thing I have ever done in film is like see my sketch in a little notebook turn into a robot on screen and just be, I like was emotional when he came to set for the first time. I was like, I drew that on a piece of paper and there he is.
There has got to be more than this.
Kaylee Bailey, thank you so much for making some time for us over here.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
Really looking forward to talking to you for quite a while now. I've been a fan, and we've, our family has worked with you when you cast Randa to be in one of your shorts, but she was also in another one at the very beginning, and maybe we'll get to that shortly. But I wonder if you could just give me a quick overview of what brought you to film and what kind of set you on fire in the early years to make you want to do this.
Yeah. I knew very young. I was 13 years old and I went to see Lord of the Rings in theaters, and we were not allowed to watch Lord of the Rings because I grew up in a really conservative Christian home in the South, and there was witchcraft in Lord of the Rings. And so I would sneak over to my best friend's house and we watched the first and the second one together. And I was obsessed. We like did the extended versions and watched all the like appendices stuff and like all the most nerdy things ever. And then when the third one was coming out in theaters, I had my friend's mom call my mom to tell her that it was a Christ-like metaphor so I could go see it.
Nice.
And so then my mom was like, okay, well, J.R. Tolkien was a Christian. Like, okay, it's fine. And so my best friend and I went to see Lord of the Rings in theaters, and we were, I guess, 13. I was going to say 12, but I guess that came out in 2003. And I remember sitting in the theater, and it's the scene where Sam and Frodo are on Mount Doom. It's like they're at the end of their ropes. They've got nothing left in the tank. And they have this beautiful moment. And Sam is like, you know, I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you. Come on. And he picks him up and he like fireman carries him up the mountain. Isn't it? It's so amazing. And like, even still, I'm like, I get emotional just thinking about it. And he like carries him up the mountain, the music crescendos. And I just remember sitting there as a 13-year-old, just like wide eyed, like tears coming down my face. And I was just quiet the entire ride home. And I remember thinking, if movies can make people feel that way, then that's what I want to do. And I got home, my dad was sitting in his reclining chair watching like Leave It to Beaver or something. And I walked in and I said, Dad, I want to make movies when I grow up. And he was like, okay. And then that was it. And I have never wanted to do anything else.
Well, it's exciting to hear you say that. And I wonder, we're different in some way, because I had early desires to do great things, but I felt so far from that world growing up in rural Idaho that it didn't even occur to me until I was about 30 that you could do things like on a level that would be equivalent to what you saw on TV or what I saw on TV. And so how did you start to bridge that gap between, because you were in rural Georgia, fair to say.
I got extremely lucky in that my church was making movies. And this was before faith-based film was really a genre. There had been like some focus on the family stuff. There had been like the Buttermilk Gang or something, and
Left Behind series. That
and Left Behind, that was a big thing. But faith-based was not a thing the way that it is now. And so my church, I remember them making an announcement on a Sunday night that the church was gonna make a movie. And they either like took up a collection or made the announcement, or I don't know. And so then my mom was like, you should work on that movie because, you know, you want to make movies. And I was homeschooled and I was like, no, I'm too shy. And so I didn't work on that one. But then the next one that they made, I was in high school, and I got to be on set as an extra, and I was like, this is the coolest thing. And then the next one they made, I was a PA, and then the next one I was a grip and electric, and then the next one I was a second AD second. And so I kind of, through those connections from my church, kind of was able to be on set. And then from there, I can probably trace all of my film contacts back to the Kendrick brothers, which is like where I started. So
what are they doing now?
they're still making movies. They still make like pretty successful. I think they have another one coming out in a couple months, I guess.
In the
they're
faith
in the faith
quadrant.
genre. Yeah. Yeah, they're squarely in that zone.
That's crazy because you hear a lot of musicians getting their start in church, but you don't hear fewer filmmakers getting their start.
Well, I feel like that would maybe be more common now, but I actually don't know of any churches that make movies. Like, I think it would be pretty rare. People tried to do that thing after the Kendrick brothers were like, oh, we make movies as a church. But eventually the movie split off from the church. So then they became their own production company, as is, much easier to do. So yeah, I don't know that many filmmakers get their start in movies making churches anymore.
It just happened to be the coincidence of those personalities, the Kendrick brothers happening to be at your church that kicked it off.
Yeah.
Well, lucky you.
I know, truly.
So you got your early start there, and then when did like more formal training begin? Or I don't even know, was there, or did you just learn on set?
I also don't want to discount the like pull yourself up by your bootstrap spirit of, growing up in the South or blue collar family. And so I bought my first camera with money I made picking up pecans, which if you're from South Georgia, you call them pecans. They're pecans if you live anywhere else. And so we had a pecan orchard, and you could make decent money if you like picked up pecans and took them to these like plants and sold your pecans by the pound. And there was one summer or fall that there was like a shortage, like nobody had pecans, but our grove was like super abundant. And so I made enough money to buy a camera. And so I bought my first one, and then I started making, surprise, surprise, Star Wars movies with my cousins, and made my sisters be in my little short films and fake commercials and stuff, and just kind of started getting practice.
Was the camera like had a built-in zoom, kind of a prosumer?
Yep.
level?
Oh, I still have it. It still works.
Yeah.
It's like amazing. I got it out of a box the other day, and I was like, I need to film something on this.
And how did you edit then? Did you?
Sony Vegas studio. Yeah, it was like I think it was free. I don't know. I might have used more pecan money to buy that. I can't remember.
Do you still have the movies?
Oh yeah.
They're somewhere on a
I
hard
made
drive.
like a Star Wars Lego like reenactment of the Phantom Menace. And I bought
like stop
these
motion style, or
kind of like some stop motion. We had the little pod racers on like marionette strings, and we like built the set in a sandbox, and my cousins would like race it around, and I'd like film it and track it, and it was like a shot for shot recreation of the pod racer sequence.
nice. I mean, highest form of flattery is
I know.
imitation.
I took my camera and I like filmed the TV when it was playing Phantom Menace to get the explosions, and then figured out how to like green screen and chroma key and like cut out the explosion in Sony Vegas to like put it on my stuff. So super illegal, but it's like hilarious.
They haven't come after you yet. I think you might be okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I think that the first that I had heard of you was your very successful fan fiction piece, Neville Longbottom and the Black Witch.
Yep.
I get that right?
Yep.
And that was, you'd cast Randa in a very small part. My wife Randa, this is before I knew her. And to me, that speaks to a little bit of strategic savvy on your part to sort of use a known IP to kind of leverage that for your own ends. And is that fair to say? Was that a conscious action?
It was. I had been wanting to make something either in the Star Wars world or Harry Potter. Lord of the Rings was harder because it was an IP that wasn't as popular anymore. And for me, it was an exercise in, can I make something for a really rabid fan base that is just brutal if you're not like within like the world correctly, if you don't get the details right, because that's what I ultimately long-term want to do. I want to do Star Wars, or they're remaking Harry Potter, and so I would love to be doing that kind of franchise work. But in order to do that, you have to really understand your audience. And so for me, it was a test in that. And also, I'm just a nerd, and so I just loved the idea of making something for practice that would be fun, that's something different. And I think I'd fallen into this like you just, you do the commercial thing and you go from project to project, but we don't make stuff that reminds you why you do it very often. You have to that it takes a lot of effort and energy. And so I was like, I want to do this. And this is what I got into filmmaking to do. And I haven't done anything fun in a long time. Mm. And so I had been trying to figure out how and what to make. And I saw Catherine Baker, who plays our Bellatrix in a film festival. It was either a film festival or a competition through Fourth Wall. I don't remember which one it was. And I saw her on screen and I was like, oh my gosh, she looks just like Helena Bonham Carter. I have to cast her in something. And so then that kickstarted the whole process, because I was like, okay, now I have my idea because I've got the actress that looks just like her. Who has that? And so then it went out from there, but found out Catherine Baker is a huge Harry Potter fan. And so she was like, I'm in.
Perfect fit.
Yeah. And then that's where it started.
And at last take, how many views has it had on YouTube?
I haven't checked in a while, but it's over 8 million now.
8 million. Yeah. That's not a bad shake.
Yeah, it's not bad.
This is really interesting because I remember reading a bunch of literature on screenplay writing and how you should do it. It's don't write for what you can accomplish, write just the most fantastic story you can. Don't worry about practical applications. Mm-hmm. And I've never caught into that so well, because that means that you kind of need maybe a lot more resources if your imagination is great.
Yeah.
And I was always kind of like, let's just do something. Let's do something small so that we can start and finish. And that kind of speaks to that. Morse code began with that very thing, where I had met a kid on a music video set, and she was 8, and she was just like a little spitfire, and we had to sit there, you call times at 9 and you don't shoot until 4, it turns out, and so you just have all this time you're killing. And it was just, I had a blast with her and her brother, and her folks were there too. And I went home that day being like, man, I should just, as a writing exercise, just write some small scene just to see. And that really was the genesis of what's kind of been the next 5 years of my life. And I also, when I wrote that out, I thought of very specific actors that I knew to kind of write toward their personalities, just to make it as doable as possible. So, so we share a little bit of that. I'm not trying to liken myself to you, far be it.
Oh my God.
But yeah, I mean, you're also a person that doesn't want to just write. You want to make stuff, and that requires a lot of know-how in a very practical way. And maybe you could talk about that a little bit. Is that stuff you've learned on sets? And
yeah, I again count myself very lucky to have been able to work on so many things over the years, because you acquire a lot of skills that you take with you to be able to make stuff. And there are a lot of little things that if you don't know how to do those things, you can't get your project made, or you can't do it as well, in the logistical side, like making a really good call sheet, staying organized, how are people being paid, who's doing the food, give me your crew, all the spreadsheets and the stuff that no creative actually wants to spend their time thinking about, that I've had to do over the years. And so it's just very repetition. I've got all my documents. I know how to hire people, and all of that mundane, boring stuff that nobody actually wants to do is what enables you to get the creative job done well. And so I've had a lot of really good teachers, and having come up through assistant directing, you have to learn that logistic producing side, because ADs, for all intents and purposes, really step into the producing role really, really well, because it's kind of the same skill set. And so coming from assistant directing, going into producing, and being the type of person that is I'm just going to figure it out. I need a plane for this WASP thing. Where do I get a plane, and how do I get them to Nashville, is a problem solving skill that I've had to hone over many, many years.
That resonates. And maybe I just do a quick glossary of terms, because this is a little bit more of a general audience than film specific. But for one, we dropped the term IP, which is intellectual property, which refers to kind of the character and the world of a particular work. So Lord of the Rings, part of that intellectual property would be Frodo and Sam, and the wizard Gandalf and all of the characters and that story.
Right.
A lot of times IP is tied to a book. This is kind of maybe the original source material for that. The Marvel movies are a great example of that. They're movies made based on comic books, the comic books being the original IP. What else did we talk about? AD, which would be an assistant director. There's typically in movies a first AD, second AD, and the first AD's responsibility is he's really the director's kind of right-hand man or woman. And the AD would be responsible for creating the call sheet. We drop that. The call sheet is like the
run of the day.
The run of the day. And it often goes out just the night before that particular day's shoot, usually late at night, sometimes the very last second. Sometimes you wake up in the morning and find out what time call time is for that day. But it's a spreadsheet. It's very well organized. You'll have the phone numbers, all the principal information, the location, the address of the location, the nearest hospital, what the weather's like. You can get a little fancy and have a quote of the day for fun. That's there's no end to how detailed call sheets can become.
I would like to say that hardly anybody reads them.
The call sheets.
The call sheet.
Yeah, they just find their name.
They find their name.
And their time.
And or they don't even open it. They just look at the body of the email that says the location and the time that they should show up. This is speaking for crew. But yeah.
No, I'm guilty as
it's a joke.
As cast.
It's like nobody looks at this thing. We spend so much time making it really pretty and like organized, and everybody's like, body of the email, done.
Yeah.
You know.
When, where? Okay, cool.
Yeah, got it.
Second AD is the person mostly in charge of like extras.
Second
Step in for me
AD,
here.
actually, the second AD is the person who if you're on a production that has, a budget and things follow like the protocol that they should, the second AD actually makes the call sheet and sends it out and taps everybody who like where they go and organizing all of that stuff. And then the second is in charge of extras, mostly. Like they're kind of a glorified, like, I don't want to say a glorified key PA. They have a lot more responsibilities, but generally it's about extras, and it's not just where are the extras, let's keep them corralled. It's like you're kind of directing background. And so that for me was something that helped me get a start, was like, okay, Kaylee, go make the background look believable. And you wouldn't believe how much energy that takes. You have to like, okay, they can't all walk in a clump across the street. If you have a shot of a street, it's like, okay, so these two people have to go. Those two people need to walk this way. Maybe we have one person coming from way, way deep, and then you run it, and the director's like, it's too busy back here. And then you have to spread it out. And so that is like a whole like skill in itself. And when you get somebody that knows how to do that, it's actually adds a lot of value to the film that you would never think about. But anyway, that's my plug for like, well done, second AD.
Somebody's raising their fist right now.
Yeah, somebody's like, I'm seen.
Well, so you've worked, maybe fair to say, a lot of the positions on a set, and there's something to be said for that. It's like the CEO who started as the janitor and worked his way to the top. They know that company inside and out, and so that's a good tip for young aspiring film directors to just, especially when you're young and you have nothing to lose. Just like don't be too proud to do anything, and be there and absorb everything, right and wrong. Like everybody's a teacher. Yeah. Like you meet the jackass on the set and you're like, how not to be?
Right.
Maybe this is a cool segue into, as a woman filmmaker, as a female filmmaker, that's another layer of challenge. And I watched this a little bit firsthand when you were filming The Wasp. My wife Randa was cast in a principal role, and I got to ride her coattails for the day. And without dragging anybody too specific into it, there's just like a fella on set that was just like couldn't listen to anybody, male or female, but the idea of a female director, oh my God. And that was my first impression of you, because I never met you before, but how poised you were, self-possessed, and also absolutely in control. Writing, that's such a difficult thing to do, especially in the face of pushback or disrespect, to just like see the goal and do what's necessary for the goal without expending any undue emotional energy.
Yeah.
And you really were great at that day. Is that, do you credit your upbringing, your character, or just
Well,
willingness to see
I
the thing
appreciate
through.
you saying that because that it was a challenge for sure, and because you don't want to disrespect somebody in kind when they are disrespecting you and saying stuff that like this guy would say stuff and I'd like respond and turn around and I could just see Diego, our DP, just being like what is this guy? Who is this guy? And it took a lot of patience, but also trying to like understand where he was coming from, I guess, because it's like there's a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People, which I think everybody has probably read, but he says something like when confronted with somebody that's very like bombastic or angry or disagreeable, that we would be similar to them if we were brought up under similar circumstances. And so coming from the world that he was in, I was like, okay, I know these kind of guys. I know how to deal with these kind of people. And it's like, it's not easy, but you kind of just have to grin and bear it a little bit and push back if it's too much disrespect. But ultimately, it was like the least of my concerns when there was like a plane flying 10 feet over crew. And it's like, don't fly that low. Like, like I don't care if there's, sexist stuff going around, but like, don't fly so low over the crew. So anyway, I appreciate you saying that. It was not really as big of an issue as keeping everybody safe on the set was.
Sure.
So, yeah.
I mean, it's a great boot camp for everything in life that is people oriented, especially when you're working with different stripes. And I think a lot of times film sets can be more or less cooperative and the industry is pretty liberal, but that was an interesting example of a key person you needed was not and had different views and was also happy to share them.
Oh yeah. Telling me that women shouldn't be pilots. I was like, cool. Well, this is a story about one. So great. I was like, just trying to be good natured, but I was like, well, considering that there was a group of many women who died in World War II to be pilots, like you can't really say that, buddy, and kind of honestly treating him like he was a child and responding that way, not in a disrespectful way, but just being like, okay, that's where you are. That's how that's how you believe. Then I'm going to talk to you in a way that is like explaining things to you, not necessarily engaging with you. So anyway, I had forgotten all about all of those things.
Yeah. Well, leave it to me to bring them right back up.
Oh yeah. It wasn't a huge deal. I just felt, Randa had to deal with it more than I did. So she is a star.
She's a pro.
She is a pro. Yeah. If anything, I was just like, how do I be more like Randa? She's amazing.
Oh, she'll love that. She's listening right now. That's great. Maybe we could talk for a second about the writing side of the game and how, this is, I have more experience with this and have my own feelings about its importance to the process. But how do you feel about that? How much time do you spend writing when you're working on an original screenplay? And how many iterations does it tend to go through? And how do you feel about that in general?
It depends on the material. It depends on how complicated the script is. But obviously it's massively important. And I think I've spent as much as a year on a script and have, it go through 12 iterations before it was like readable to anybody. And then I've, written a script in a couple weeks that went on to production. And so I think it just so varies based on what the project is. Like I'm working on a Christmas movie right now, and to get the first draft of that took me like a week and a half. And, not to say that that's anywhere near done, but that's like your marble slab that you're going to start chipping away at. But sometimes, sometimes the marble slab takes, months to get there because it's like complicated in structure. And so I think like it varies a lot. And I don't want to say that writing is like, I don't want to say it's the hardest part, but kind of, it's the most difficult to like make yourself get up in the morning, and you don't have a deadline most of the time. You're writing on spec. So like, you've got nothing in your life that indicates that this will ever actually get made.
Yeah.
So you kind of go into it feeling like, am I just throwing energy down the toilet today? Is there anything better I could be doing with my time?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the answer might be yes, but I think we can't discount the time and the practice and just the repetition that you get, because I've written a lot of scripts that will never see the light of day, but those scripts helped me hone my style. So it's never wasted time, even though I certainly feel like a lot of times it can be.
A common sentiment.
Yeah.
I know that one very well.
And like sometimes I had a call today about a script I wrote 10 years ago, and now it's coming back around. And I was like, wow, I didn't ever see that coming. But yeah, I have a script about that. Mm-hmm. And it's perfect for what they're wanting to do. So anyway, I think that we can't really write off any of the projects that we do, because you never know when they're going to come back around. Mm-hmm. So
that is, I think, a really important thing to take away. Any crazy person that's a writer / creative is that on some level the game is finishing whatever you start, and there's an act of faith in that that's really about as pure an act of faith as there is, especially when you're in the middle of it and you're like, man, not only have I spent a long time on this, but I can tell that I have a long time to go, and I also don't know if this is ever going to be anything that's anything. And yet to persevere through that, because you're not the first person. Everyone gets to that moment and has 10 more of them usually before the thing is done. And it's very true that not a lot of scripts actually get made. So it might well end up being something that doesn't finally appear on screen. That said, there's no such thing as an experience that you don't learn from if you lived it. I know that one right now. I'm in the middle of writing this novel, and all it amounts to is hitting 1,000 words a day. And it's going to be, yeah, that's all.
That's it.
And I can tell, I mean, I structured it out, like 2 years ago, and then I lost the spreadsheet, and then I found it.
Gosh,
like a month, a couple of, but I had already started writing it. I went through the emotional journey of like, I cannot find this. And I had
the worst feeling.
sold a computer, and I wiped a drive, and I was like, it must've been on that thing. And I never, and it was gone. And I was like, okay, but I remember the story. And so I just started reblocking it out as best I could. And then I wrote it again from there. And I was like 15,000 words into it. And then I found it, I printed it out in a folder. I was looking for a passport something, and I found this like 2 weeks ago. And I'm like, oh my God. And it was weird because the stories were a bit kind of pretty different in terms of like the main protagonist, like, cause I had changed and the story that I wanted to tell had changed a little bit, not in external beats exactly, but what that character, where he started and where I think that he's going to finish. Anyway, but that thing is going to probably be 100,000 plus words. I can tell just by where I'm at in the story, and I'm 30,000 words into it. So it's like I have so far to go.
Wow.
And is it even going to be any good? And is it even going to be published? And does anyone even read? And does like all of the ways I could spend my time? I'm trying to sell Morse code right now. I'm like, I should be spending 3 hours a day, 3 or 4 hours a day. Is that, can I really? It's just like, what do you want to do? I want to write this novel. I want to write this story. It's been in my bones for 15 years. That is all you need to worry about, Corby.
Yeah.
Sit down in your chair. It's 6:30 in the morning. You have 3 hours. Go.
Wow.
I mean, you have your version of that, right? I mean, that's what it is when you're inside of a, well.
I'm like so impressed. I'm like, wow, Corby.
That's not what that was not my point at all. It was just the loneliness of writing. And it's actually the foundation, I think, of every story, no matter what your ultimate genre is or ultimate outlet. I also think it's ironic that my impression, especially before I got involved in film, was it's so glamorous, and it's these beautiful people, and the lighting was it's just like larger than life. All of these pieces,
right? And
now, having been in it a little bit, I feel like I feel the opposite about it. Like making a movie incredibly painstaking, and at times the word tedious absolutely applies.
Sure.
And the lighting setups take forever, and everything takes forever. The location scouting, the casting. There's so many moving parts that have to be in line. Whereas writing is so simple that the only thing that you're waiting for is the next line. You can go work as fast as your imagination. You can also make anything. There's no boundary. There's all kinds of boundaries to making movies.
Yeah.
Money being a principal
Primary.
one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, what are you working on right now? That's your project.
Well, I wouldn't call it mine because it's a lot of different people's, but I am still working on my first feature, which is a kids sci-fi action adventure film called The Futurist, that was shot in Nashville with Evolve Studios. And they also did the fan film. And so we've had a creative partnership for a long time, and we're in post for it still. So we're kind of like finishing up the last batch of VFX shots, which I think there were like anywhere from 600 to 700 VFX shots. So obviously takes a lot of time. And this is a sci-fi movie, so there's a lot of like holograms and explosions and all kind of stuff. And so we are at the tail end of that process, which is super exciting because we've been watching it for a year and seeing little blank gaps here and there, or like, VFX goes here, And so I'm very excited to get that kind of done and to be able to watch the movie without any caveats. Like there's an establishing shot that goes here, and I don't have to say that.
There'll be a lot of smoke
There'll
here.
There'll be some stuff going on. I'm excited to not have to do that. So that process has been, like you're saying, some of it has been very tedious, but a lot of it has just been so much fun. And we got to make a little robot for it. That was probably my favorite thing I have ever done in film, is like see my sketch in a little notebook turn into a robot on screen, and just I was emotional when he came to set for the first time. I was like, I drew that on a piece of paper, and there he is. It's a physical robot. Yeah. And it's just, the guy who built him is just like a freaking genius. His name is Davis DeWitt, and he was like a friend of one of the people on the team, and he was on Motor Mythbusters, so just like an engineering brain. And we were like, we need a robot for this movie. Like, what limitations do we have in the design? And he was like, well, it needs to be, if you're going to do this, and I like sent him a couple different sketches, and he was like, well, we can't do it with like the one wheel, because then you have to have like a gyro inside of it, and it has to have all these different components to be a one wheel. So really, it's going to be easier if you make it 3 wheels. And so, okay, got it. And then back to the drawing board, redo it. Would this work? Yeah, that would be great. And can we use a projector as his head? Like it was from found part, like designed by a kid from like found parts in his garage. And he was like, yeah. And so I sent him some sketches. We got a concept artist to flesh out the design and make it like, from all different angles. And then he pulled it into a program, designed it in 3D. I signed off on it. Everybody signed off on it. And then he 3D printed the thing and painted it and like showed up on set with it, and it was a remote control robot. And it was like amazing. The coolest thing, because he just kind of, I cannot say enough good things about this guy, but he opened up so many different avenues for expression for the robot. He was like, what if the lights change colors? Great, they can do that. Cool. What if the antenna goes up and down? And then, when he's sad, the antenna can go back. And I was like, that's perfect.
Amazing.
Stuff that I never would have thought to ask. But he was like, yeah, we can build that in. And so you'd see him, he was on set with us operating. And he also ended up voicing the character, because he voiced it on set for the actors. And that after a certain point, you couldn't unhear him. And the robot's name is Newt. So you couldn't unhear Newt as Davis, who was the designer. And so he was wired. So even for a lot of the edits, we had his voice in temp, because he was there during the performance live. So he would be like operating Newt, which had like 3 different thumb controls that he had to work on, and was also delivering lines and hitting his mark. We were like, we thought that the robot was going to be the most difficult part of this movie, but the robot hit his mark every time. It was like amazing. So anyway, that's a long-winded way of answering that question, but The Futurist is what we're currently working on as like a project that has been in the works for a long time. And then separate from that, I'm writing a Christmas movie, and that's kind of all I have on deck right now.
Here's a question that I have based on that. How I'm thinking of filmmakers trying to get their film made. Obviously, there's a bazillion ways to do it, or 7. Who knows? Somewhere between those two. But one of those ways is to collaborate with an established studio with a lot of great gear. And it sounds like you've done that a few times now. How did that come about? How did you get that first deal? Did you pitch your vision? Did you pitch your script?
Like for...
Maybe Neville?
Yeah. So that... I had been working with that production company not as a director, but just as a crew member. I like production coordinated, I produced, I associate produced. So I kind of did a lot of, and then they started hiring me as an AD. So it kind of built a lot of like goodwill within the company from the projects that we worked on together. So there was an established relationship there. And then I was also on their company soccer team. We were very competitive. And so we had jerseys and everything. It was great. And so I was at the soccer game, and me and the executive producer of the company were lacing up our boots next to each other. And he's like, so what are you working on? And I was like, well, I know it's kind of dorky, but I have this Harry Potter fan film that I want to do. I have this actress that looks just like Helena Bonham Carter. So it's about Bellatrix. Kind of dorky, but I think it'll be fun. And he's like, I love Harry Potter. And he was like, my wife is obsessed. I'd love to read the script. And I was like, okay. And so I sent it over to him, and he was like, I love it. We want to get into narrative. At that point, they hadn't done anything narrative yet. They were like a really kick-ass promo commercial company. Yeah. And so they were like, we want to do something narrative just to kind of like test the waters. And this feels like something doable for us, because they're also really, really great at VFX. So they were like, this kind of lets us like as kind of a promo for what we can do in the narrative space. And so I was like, great. And he was like, we just need to do it in 6 months. Like I was planning on shooting it at like 2 weeks later, because I already had like locations. I had already cast everything. I had written everything. I had already started acquiring props. So like there was stuff that was already in motion before I talked to them about it. And I think that is helpful too. And it's appealing to a production company or a producer or anything that it's like you've already got momentum. It's not like they have to muster up the momentum for you. It's like, I'm going to make this. Yes. You can either be a part of it or
1,000%.
not, but it will happen. Yeah. And then it takes some of the pressure off of your partner, because they're like, okay, well, we don't have to make or break it. It's going to happen. We can be a part of it. And that feels a lot more appealing to people. So that and WASP were the same thing, that I was like, I'm going to make this. Like I will either pay for it myself, call in every favor I have. And then a production company is like, well, then we want to do it. So I think there's something to be said for that you can't, I don't want to say you can't, but that's not been my experience, that you just kind of come to somebody and be like, here's my project, make it. It's like you've already built the momentum and the train is already going down the tracks.
I couldn't agree with you more. Rand and I talk about that all the time. Randa's favorite quote is, this train is leaving the station. You guys want on it or not? 'Cause it's leaving right now. So you don't, if it's not going to be here tomorrow. But in all seriousness, I think that is maybe the key difference between people that make their projects and people that don't. I have a number of friends in our circle that have great ideas and short scripts or scripts that are on their way, and what's missing is that thing. And it's the difference between asking permission and announcing yourself. And there's something really attractive. And I know this from the outside too, when I see people that are just going to make their thing. I'm curious, I'm also like, man, I have a free Saturday. I'll hold a boom. How can I help you?
Yeah.
I love being around people that aren't waiting for somebody to do the hard part for them.
Right.
Because there's no end to hard parts.
Yeah.
And, I'm not surprised at all that somebody would, that is so you too. You're just like, I'm going to do this. And
it's true. It has cost. And I think that's something that people don't generally people will tell you don't spend your own money on your projects. And it's like, well, that would be great, but also that's not real. And if I'm going to get something made, I have to have skin in the game. And that has been every project that I've gotten made has been with a studio or partner, has been because I've been like, I've already paid stuff. I've already got skin in the game. I'm going to put this much money towards it. And I think people tend to be hesitant to like actually use resources, money specifically of their own to go and get something of theirs made. And I could be wrong about that, but I've just taken a like significant financial risk over the years, knowing that like it's never going to come back. Like you're never putting money into it. Like, you know, for Neville, you're never going to make any money off of that. You're doing it because you want to do it and you need to get your stuff made, and it's just in you and you have to get it out of you. And so I listened to this South by Southwest from years ago when Mark Duplass was speaking. And his advice to filmmakers was just, the cavalry isn't coming and you are the cavalry. Nobody's coming to save you. Nobody's coming to fund your project. And this is him talking after, you know, making many successful things and being like, still nobody's coming. I have to do it myself. And so I think once the faster you realize that like, it's not going to be because you go and pitch an idea to a studio, it's going to be because you started making it and a studio partnered with you, or it's, and there's limitations to that obviously, but when you're at the beginning, you're trying to get a short film made or a pilot or anything like that, the things that you can make, you should make on your own. And I think that would be something that, advice I would give to coming up filmmakers or to younger me would be like, keep just doing it on your own. Because you kind of wait for somebody to buy into your script, somebody to fund your thing. And if you do that, you're going to be waiting a long time.
No, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Two thoughts, and I'm going to try to remember the second one by the time I get to it. But one is that we just came back from South by Southwest.
Yeah, I saw.
Duplass brothers were there.
That's so
the
awesome.
panel, I went to his panel. Same note.
Yep.
I went to my head's still spinning. We got back last night. I did, and I went to so many panels. The tone of which was, television is dead. The industry is shrinking. It's never been harder to get your TV show off the ground or find distribution for your movie. It's not a great time. Duplass Brothers panel was, all of those things are true. The cavalry is not coming. Like he said, here's the thing. If somebody raised their hand, like, how is sir, thank you for your time. What is my question, what is the best way to get a studio executive to look at your project? And he like takes a breath and he looks at his buddy and he's just like, do you want to know the truth? Yeah. Nobody wants to read your script. The studio does not give a shit about you or your project. And he's like, I'm sorry to say that, but that is true. Just the truth. Yeah. And my advice to you is to figure out how to make it yourself. And what you learn along the way will afford you well in future projects. And it also will determine whether or not you have what it takes to survive in this terrible industry where it is cutthroat. It is very expensive. It is a winner take all scene. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. I mean, the whole experience with Morse code was, you know, I wrote that 6-page script. I found a location. I talked a guy into letting us film the one weekend where there was 4 hours in the morning that we could do it for free. My payment to him was, it was an ice cream scene. I will pay for all the ice cream and I'll feed the cast and crew coffee and stuff and just put it on the tab and we'll pay for that. And he was like, okay. And we did that. I did the editing myself. I did the audio myself. I didn't know how to do either of those things, but it's like, I know how to watch movies. I know when the audio is too loud or like when it doesn't sound right, and everything took forever, but I could do it. And it was doable. It was a 6-minute, finished product. And then that, led to another thing and led to another thing. And for some reason I was just like, I like this story. I want to keep doing it. And then we finally got, we retooled all that material into a 30-page script. Then I found people willing to pay for it. And we shot a much bigger movie for that money that we had, it's because of Randa really and her finesse. We had a great run on the film festival circuit. We have, a big attorney in New York that's repping the film now that we just hung out with all at South by, and he introduced me to a bunch of people that are scary. I had dinner with Susan Sarandon. Crazy.
What?
Yeah, no,
oh my
there's
gosh,
so many
why
stories
have
when
we been
we're
talking
done.
about me this whole
When we're
time?
done with this. My point is that I have this pilot. I'm not sure I would recommend anyone ever make a pilot. I would say in the future, make something that's a finished product that you can sell and move on.
Yeah.
And we're looking at a situation where it's like, I think that we're going to revisit this idea and make our own limited series, shoot 5 more, and then have a thing that we can sell. This is like barring the unforeseen. But one reason is I'm fucking relentless. This story, been 6 years in my life in this. I love it. I love the story. And it's not just about me. It's about this community that's really special to me and is also unique on the face of the earth. And is also like nobody knows about it. And it's ripe for its own celebration.
Yeah.
And Morse code might be a vehicle to do that. And I also am very fortunate to have an amazing team like Randa, Trav, who directed it. I mean, I love them a lot. And I would go through this journey all over again with them and feel like it's already been a win. So my point is that like the Cavalry's not coming. Yeah, nobody's gonna. It's very unlikely. It's possible, and I'm still working hard on that front. That's maybe a distribution platform, a streamer like Netflix or Hulu will get excited and pick up the show and want to make them. The reality is that they're terrified right now. It's not going to be. It's not a good year for all of that. Do I care? No. It's just. I mean, I do, but. We also had a conversation with this guy who is the biggest person I ever met in the movie business. I'll tell you this without dropping names or something, but we went to this other panel, and it was 2 really heavy producers that had their own documentary on Billy Preston, the 5th Beatle, that was playing at the festival, and they were a similar kind of thing, how to find distribution for it. The panel was great. And interesting. And I asked my question. You can wait in line and ask a question in front of everybody. And I never ask a question. I just pitch the show. And
I mean, that's going to be the biggest room you ever get to elevator pitch in. So well done.
I mean, you might as well.
Yeah.
That's how we got our attorney. I did the same
microphone.
thing at a different festival, but like the same thing. And I did that to set up the hang afterwards. And we just sat there, Randa and I, and we talked to everybody that like our fellow filmmakers out in the audience when they're breaking up. And because everybody charges these people afterwards, and you just don't want to be in the crowd of those people. So you wait, and you might not even get to talk to them. But to me, I have found that waiting is better, and just like let everybody else dissipate. And then they're kind of packing up, and you can be like, hey, thank you so much. This is what we did. And then we ended up having a really long conversation with both of them. And they were like, yeah, what was that show? Well, one of them is the head of the DGA.
Well, geez.
I mean, these 2 people were the heaviest people I've ever met in the industry. And I tell you what, Kaylee, they were like, what was your movie about? And I started telling them, and I have never been so listened to. I'm like, it gives me chills now, because I suddenly realized that these were the most powerful people that I've ever talked to in my life, as far as my career is concerned. And they were absolutely listening to me, because that's what they do. They were evaluating this pitch like in real time, and it was scared the shit out of me. But at the end of the show, the guy, this British man, he was like, "Well, I'll watch your pilot for fun. I mean, for fun, I'd be happy to watch it and give you my feedback." And Randa was like, can I get your email address? And he rattled it right off for her. And that's what it was. And we just sent it yesterday. And this guy is worth $50 million. I looked it up and he's like the number of films many, many films that you know. And so that guy could be like, also, this is, I'm going to remember my other thing. This is a segue into the other thing. Why I think that guy, whatever, he might just like write back and be like, it's not for me. I loved it. Thank you so much. Or he might want to get more involved. Who knows? But why he might care is because he loves music and music docs. And there's that point of contact. And that's why we waited so long anyway. Because I'm like, he's here because of a music doc. he loves music. Half the movies that he's done in the past are variations on a theme of Morse code. So that was my second thing, is that you, with Gear 7 and Neville, you had something, they had something with
Evolve.
I'm sorry, Evolve.
Yeah.
Same building?
No, Gear 7, same genre of stuff, commercial.
Gotcha.
Wise, yeah.
The competitors.
Yeah. Kind of,
With you and Evolve, you had something they wanted. They had gear and they had savvy and they had experience, but they were doing all commercials and stuff. And you had art, you had a narrative, and they were like, I want to get, so you had something that they wanted.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'm sure you maybe knew that or had a feeling about that, but you were able to frame what you did, what you wanted to do and what you were doing in a context of something that they needed and or wanted to explore. So you were a fit for each other.
Yeah.
You weren't like, hey, can you help me make my movie?
Right. And it's such a challenge too, though, because you want to be bold and ask people for what you want, but also you have to thread the needle of not asking for too much because you don't want to overstep. And I think for Neville, that was just, I feel like, pure happenstance that they were interested in it, because I wasn't pitching. I was just like, yeah, I'm doing this thing. Like, you know, this is where I'm going. And then he was like, well, come over this way. And so that's a credit to Joel Edwards, like giving me a chance to do something. Because here I am, like, you know, I was in my 20s and had never done anything of that length. And he was like, sure, let's make your thing. And so having somebody believe in you like that is also like a critical component, that they not only believe in your idea, but they believe in you as a person. Like, that's such a gift. And I think that dynamic was created over, you know, years of working for them just as a crew member. So I feel like that I got very lucky in that way as well. And that's another thing, I guess. A lot of this is luck. So that's the X factor that you can't really account for. But I agree with you that if you're pitching something, you really need to be mindful of speaking in terms of the other person, like what benefits them, what you have that they need, versus like, you have stuff that I need, you have resources that I want to use. It's like, well, they don't care about what you need. They don't care about what you want. Like, what do you have that satisfies a mandate that they have? And that might be something that like happens with you and your producer, that like you have something that he needs and wants to like put on his slate. And props to you being very strategic about like where you do that. And so anyway, that's kind of rambling at that point. But yeah, like offering somebody something that they actually need and being strategic about that is super important, and like not to be discounted. So
yeah. And relatedly, I find it's really helpful to work toward realizing and finishing the smallest possible increment of the thing that I want to make. I think that finishing is so important. And finishing means finishing. It doesn't matter if it means 1,000 pages, 1,000 words a day, or a 6-page script, or a 1-page script, or a feature film. It's just like, finish the thing. And if you're overwhelmed by the magnitude of the project, which is easily done. I mean, it's especially for feature length stuff or novels, then don't try to do that the first time. Don't worry about that. Just write one little thing that you can get done. Like write the shortest possible script, and then make it. And anybody can make a 3-page story. And you'll learn so much from doing it. And you'll also, like, after you finish that one thing, and it doesn't have to be making a short film, it's just whatever that thing is that you define yourself, having done that, you'll feel that much more confident. You'll feel like, maybe I can do this. I went from feeling like there's no way to, and I still feel like there's no way all the time. I feel that way with the novel that I'm working on. I'm just like, I don't think I have what this takes. I don't even know what I'm doing. It's like, here's another bad sentence and another bad sentence. And who are these characters anyway? And whatever. I still am like, okay, just hit, you can feel, I allow myself to feel however I need to feel, because I'm a crazy person like everybody else. And I feel very insecure most of the time when I do stuff. That's all fine. What's not allowed is to let those emotions affect the action that I'm setting out to take. So I can just feel terrible for 3 hours. And if at the end of those terrible 3 hours, there's a new 1,000 words on the page, I'm like, cool. I forgive myself and move on and hit it the next day.
Well, that's a Quentin Tarantino. Is it Quentin Tarantino, or it might even be Jeff Goldblum? That was like a mediocre finished script is better than a brilliant unfinished one.
David Lynch, I think.
Oh,
maybe
is it David Lynch?
It might be a Lynch one.
Maybe so.
He's got it. He pops up on the thing.
Yeah, he pops up on the Instagram, the inspirational quotes. Yeah.
I feel like he pops up on my Instagram more than he writes scripts anymore. I don't know. It's shifted jobs. Maybe you could talk to me for a second about, this is, I think that I might be remembering this wrong and I might be making this up. So there's the caveat. But having been a DP, a director of photography, which is the person that's kind of running the camera, but they're not usually the person who's in charge of the thing. That's the director's job. It's their vision. And the DP's job is like to head the camera team, even if maybe there's only one camera and the person's also holding the camera. The DP's not in charge. And how did you... I know a common complaint, I think, is DPs that feel like they're stuck in the DP game and they can't jump to being a director. And there's like some pushback. Like I've actually reached out to a couple of DPs on other projects for things that I wanted to hire them for. And they're like, I actually just don't want to do it. I'm not DPing right now. I really am just, I'll work with you to direct. Or a first AC, who's the person that kind of helps the director or photographer change out lenses, whatever. They're sort of the DPs.
Pull focus.
They also pull focus. That's the principal one. Thank you for saying all the things that I'm like pretending I know what I talk about. But like the first AC they want to be the DP,
right? And
you can't hire them for they might not want to do this. So, and I respect all of that because I noticed this from, all the things that I've done is that the reputation you cultivate for yourself becomes your opportunity and your hindrance. And it is really hard once you have established yourself in a certain job on the set to break out of that or move higher up. And it's an art unto itself. And can you speak to that?
Yeah, it's a hard and scary jump. I've done it a couple times. And at some point you have to start saying no to anything that isn't the thing that you want to do. And there's a period of time, this is both times that I've done it. So I went from being an AD and I was like, I don't want to AD anymore. It's awful. I want to be in the creative part. I want to edit. And so I transitioned over into editing. Fortunately, I got very lucky and somebody just gave me an opportunity that I didn't deserve. And just based off of my work ethic. And they gave me a chance and I cut a movie and then I cut another one and I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to edit anymore. This is terrible.
Yeah.
I'm like alone all the time. I can't in a dark room. It's just not good for me as a person. Like the people that can do that, like it's incredible, but it's not for me. And so I then was like, I'm not going to AD or edit, it's really easy to get work as, I don't want to say really easy, but it's easier to get work as an AD or an editor than it is to get work as a writer or director. And so the risk then is like, you can easily get pigeonholed into one of those two things, especially if you're into anything, especially if you're good at it. So coming from ADing, which I was good at, people want to hire you as just that thing. And so getting those calls from people who also hire directors to then say, I'm not ADing anymore, I'm just directing, it in their minds can kind of reset and retool and be like, okay, well, that's good to know. And then eventually starting to establish yourself. Like for me, I made a bunch of spec spots and I started just making my own stuff to like have as sample work that ended up getting me real work. Making that switch is scary because I do think at some point you have to decide, which we all know means to cut off all other options. You have to cut off all other options. And so that for me meant like, I'm not ADing, I'm not editing anymore. I guess I'm going to be living on my savings until I get a writing or a directing job. And then of course, at the very last moment, something comes through and you get a directing job or writing job. And that has usually been the case for me, that I'm like, on the verge of like, I guess I got to go back to editing and ADing because there's no other options. I'm never going to get paid. And then something comes through. So anyway, that's another long-winded way of answering the question. But I think that if you're wanting to write or direct or change paths, the only way to do it is to do it. And that's kind of the unfortunate catch-22 is that nobody's going to hire you to do something unless you do something, but you can't do it unless you've been hired to do it. And for directing, fortunately, especially if you're coming from something like DPing, you can DP/direct, but not say that you DP'd the thing. Like, go shoot something that you're directing and give yourself a bunch of like stuff to put on your website. And that is what I did. And just kind of rebrand yourself as that's what you do. And I think you're right. Like, I've seen a lot of people in Nashville specifically starting to do that they're like, we don't want to be this crew member position anymore. We want to be a DP person, or we want to be a DP person. We want to be a DP, or we want to be a director. We want to be a writer. And it takes a lot of bravery to do.
It takes a lot of bravery, and you're saying no, and in a business that doesn't like being said no to,
right?
It's just somebody's offering you a job, and we're all freelancers here, and that takes a lot of guts, and there's a price to pay in the short term. But if you believe in yourself and you've got, you're like, no, I deserve a place at the table in this seat, then you're probably going to be okay, because it's not everybody has the cojones to do that. And lots of people, even in the industry, are like satisfied in their lane. Like, this is what I do. I am a wardrobe stylist. And this is the gig that I want.
Well, and that's the people that you want to hire. It's like the people that are in their lane.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a lesson for everybody is like, if you find your lane, that's the thing you want to do. And that's not what anybody wants to hear. Like, people want to hear that you can be a jack of all trades. People want to hear that, like, you can do all of the different things. The unfortunate truth is that you need to be able to do all of the things, but you need to have a lane, And so that's kind of a weird, like, position to be in. It's like you kind of have to have all the pieces of the puzzle. Like, you not only have to be an actor, but you also have to know how to produce, and you have to know how to pitch your show, and you have to know how to, edit the thing, and you need to know how to sound mix. It's like all these random things that you have to also know how to do in order to be able to do the thing that you really want to do. So,
well, no, I think it's funny, because the very thing that enables you early on to make a project as opposed not to, that is to say, wearing all of the hats, doing all of the dirty work, all of the unglamorous stuff, in addition to the glamorous stuff, is the very thing that's kind of a limiting factor as you move higher up the food chain. And I've noticed that I've been a DIY person my whole life, and it was music forever. And so I was just like, I know how to run a Pro Tool session. When Logic came out, I learned Logic, and I've produced other people's records, and I can play several instruments pretty well. That's not me bragging or something.
Oh, but you can brag. Look at all these instruments on the wall.
Well, I can play these things, but
incredible.
Everybody's better than me at them. You know what I mean? Like, I'm first to say there's a zillion guitar players that, I'm having a record made right now, and the guy that I hired is the best guitar player and the most creative person I know in music. And I'm happy to take advantage of that. My point is that as time has gone on, and I'm still guilty of this, because here I am, like, in film. This podcast is about film and music and writing, and I'm interested in all three of those things. And I wonder sometimes, like, dude, just pick one thing. And I'm like, oh, I kind of know. But within my interest in many things, I have over the years increasingly gone, okay, what is it that you feel like you do bring to the table more than, like, what can I do that I think I can do at a higher level than most other people. And for me, that's writing, or like, because it's just like, I'm crazy enough to just sit by myself for hours a day, and I don't hate it. I mean, I do, but I'd rather hate doing that than hate editing.
Sure.
And I can edit, but I was just like, you can find somebody who loves editing. And I can act, but there's like, I'm getting old too, and so those gigs are getting farther. And I can write songs and I can sing, but there's like, and I do actually really like doing that stuff. And I don't know, life is, now I'm mumbling and trailing off, but the point is that it's great, I think, especially at the beginning, learn how to do as many things as possible, while trying your best to run with people that are kind of in your zone of interest, so that you can help each other. I think that's something that if I had to do it over again, I would be better about that. I'm like too introverted of a person, and too, like, I'm always, I don't know, I just rather do it myself than count on somebody to do something. That's scary to do that, especially because so many people don't do what they say they're going to do, or maybe they don't do it as well as you could in the end. And then where are you?
Yep.
But the fact of the matter is, the film is a collaborative business, and that's the nature of the art. And so you do have to trust people, and I'm still having a hard time with that one. Hard time. It's like, I notice that every time when I'm involved in something that I've written or, we'll say, and I, like with Morse code even, the actor never says the thing the way I hear it in my head. And that was the first thing I had to surrender.
Isn't it? It's hard.
But it's a joy too. It's also a surprise. And it's like, okay, I cast this person. We cast this person.
Right.
It's their thing now. And like, there's a reason why we cast them. We saw something in them. They were like, this is the best person for this role. And now it's yours. And I'm, maybe if they're reading it wrong, or not reading it wrong, they're motivated by something different.
Right,
whatever,
right.
you can make adjustments and stuff.
Yeah.
But only within reason. Like at some level, it's like, okay. And
I've definitely done it before where I'm like, I'm so sorry. I know I'm giving you a line reading. I have to though. Like, this is how it's been in my head for like a year and a half. Like, can we just say it once this way?
Yes.
And I hate doing that, but like sometimes you just have to scratch the itch,
Sure.
and I'd rather let the actor run with it and make it better. But if there's a thing that I'm like, I'm stuck because it's got to be a certain thing, then, I find actors are generally pretty accommodating with that. And then they probably rip you a new one behind your back. But
I mean, as somebody who's acted and stuff, actors they want to please, at least me. I want the director to be happy.
Yeah.
I totally do. And, I want, like, I'm going to do my thing that I feel it. But at the end of the day, if they're like, can you do it like this? I'm like, yeah. But maybe I'm different too. Then, we're all weird personalities.
Yeah.
I know some actors in town who might not be quite so accommodating. And
this is true.
We work with all kinds in this business.
Yeah. And, as I get older and do more things, you hold less tightly to those things that you have in your head, and realize that once you get to set, you're making a different movie. And there's that famous saying that you make 3 movies over the course of making one movie. It's the movie you write, the movie you direct, the movie you edit. And that's so true. Like, if you look at, for the feature that I just did, the finished product is just miles away from what we started with. And it changed on set, it changed in reshoots, and it changed in post. And so I think realizing that and not being too precious about your written material, unless it's a point of like plot or it's a callback. Like, there are certainly things that an actor's like, that doesn't feel natural for me to say. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, you have to say it because it comes back later. And they're like, oh, right. Totally forgot about that. And if you don't say it now, the callback doesn't work. We have to change that. And we already shot that. So you have to do this,
Yeah.
So I think, learning to hold loosely and let things be improved is certainly something that I'm learning as a relatively new director. I still feel very new. And then also, like, there are things that you do have to stick up for. So it's a balance, I think. But
speak to this idea too, speaking of editing. And also when you're shooting, there's a little bit of this, but I think I've noticed that when I've edited stuff, so much of it is like solving problems. Solving problems in an actor's delivery. Well, the best, when they say that it's best, they're in the reverse. Or we didn't get this line. I can't believe we didn't get this line. It was right there on the script, and we didn't, like, somebody missed it. All these things happen. And so much of the edit is making this unwieldy thing work.
Yeah.
Because it's not like you're designing this in a petri dish and it's ideal conditions. There's nothing ideal about making a movie.
Yeah.
It's always hazardous and surprising, and there's a leaf blower in the background, and like, we just lost light. It's too dark. Somebody forgot the grip, forgot the diffuser, whatever. And you're just constantly solving these problems. But that is a huge part of the filmmaker's DNA, or the kit that they have to have.
Right.
I was meant to frame that as a question, but then I just delivered this diatribe, and I'm sorry for
great.
that.
Yeah, I think the editor is just such an important piece of that process, because you're right. Like, initially, the first pass is not necessarily like, we're going to make this beautiful creative thing. It's like, did they say the whole line? Did we get the best performance? Did we even have a shot where they did the right thing? Or did we forget this thing? Or, oh, we can't cut to that because we lost a light in the background and it's going to be disorienting. Or, you know, shit, they crossed a line, you know, like the eye line is off, you know? And so it's all those kind of things that on the day you're just rushing to get everything finished. And there's never enough time for what you want to do. And then post is like making sense of this mess.
Oh yeah, like step one, horrifically realizing all the things that you didn't remember that you did wrong. Yeah, and now this is what we've got. Yeah, this is what we've got to work with.
Man,
rolling up your sleeves.
Yeah, there was one specific moment in Futurist where we had a specific line that we absolutely needed, and we missed it on every single shot that was not on the actor's face. And so it was always like off camera, over the shoulder. And we were like, did we never get a close up of him saying that line? And for whatever reason, we never did. It was like a halfway point in the scene that we needed to reblock. So in the reblocking, we missed it. And it was like, how are we supposed to get around that? Like, we don't have enough shot. So to your point, it's just such a puzzle piece, and it's the editor being like, well, we could cut to this thing, we could cut to that thing. I highly recommend putting a robot in your movie that doesn't have a mouth, because 9 times out of 10, when we didn't have a solution, we're like, cut to Newt. He can say something. Like, we can have him say whatever we want. And so it's like great. And I think also editors will probably tell you, especially on like lower budget indie movies where you don't have enough time to do anything, but you can fix stuff in ADR. If you're over the shoulder on an actor and that actor is delivering a line, I would say probably like 7 out of 10 times that line is not what was originally said. It's something else that you had to change. And that's always interesting to me now, like going into watching movies, is being like, do I think that line was actually what was there? Or did they change it in the edit, to make it make sense now? Because we're on the reaction, so maybe the line changed. You know? So it's just an interesting thing to know now.
Or my favorite thing to see too is when you're doing overs, which is in you can picture this, people at home, like when the camera's over the person's shoulder and you're shooting one actor's face, and then it flips, and now it's the other actor's talking, and you can see a little bit of their shoulder in their head. That happens all the time, obviously, in film and TV. But if you watch, it's really funny because editors will do this all the time in the biggest productions, but all over the place in TV shows. And we did it in Morse Code, where the actor, maybe you want this actor's face, they're in the reaction while the other actor who's not facing camera is talking, but the actor's face that's on camera, they have this great reaction, and you just want to have that. And so you'll grab that from maybe another section of this interaction that you filmed. And so if you look closely at the person's head who's not facing you, you'll see them, like, maybe their head's bouncing because they're talking when they're not supposed to be, or maybe they're not talking when you're hearing the voice.
When
You'll
there
hear
is
this
a
stuff
line,
like not quite lined up.
You see it all the time.
Yeah.
See it all the time, and especially in like sitcoms or like it happens a lot. But in a lot of major movies too. But which is surprising because you can do splits, and so we did that in Futurist all the time.
What do you mean by splits?
You like split the frame so that this person, you use a moment of this person from a different moment, and then the person on camera, like the moment that you want. So if you want like a reaction or a line from this person, but this person is still talking, or whatever, you split the shot in half and then slip the other actor so that they're not moving and they're just reacting to the line, or they aren't, or they are moving when they're supposed to be saying the line because the shoulder moves or the hair moves or you see the mouth move. And that was something our editor on Futurist, Zach Pritchard, was like really like precise about. So we have tons of split frames because we need like the actors to be moving for continuity correctly.
And that's more easily done when the cameras are on sticks. Yeah. So the camera will be on a tripod, and so the camera's fixed. And then you can a lot more easily cut the actual frame and superimpose one frame over another. That's not quite the right language, but you guys get it, hopefully. One last note, and this is just a little feedback from South by, but there's a lot of movies and you don't see hardly any of them. It's a very small fraction, but I happened to go see one that our friend Ted Welch was in. He's an actor here in Nashville. He was in this film called Bob Trevino Likes It that was directed by a woman named Tracy Lehman. And have you heard of this, or do you know?
Well, I saw that it won.
Yeah, and it won the jury prize. And I was in a packed theater, like the nicest theater they had there, and it was packed, and it was like a primo time. Thanks to Travis for scoring the tickets for Randa and I. Travis was there too. And this film, it was, I just cried with strangers in this movie several times. And Travis and I talked about it, and Rand and I talked about it a lot afterwards, because it wasn't a perfect film, like structurally, but there was something so true-hearted about it that was just undeniable. And it didn't hurt that the acting was very great, especially in the lead, Barbie Ferreira, who was in the huge HBO show with the little kids, Euphoria, little kids.
Oh, it's the little kids. Yeah.
But so she was the lead, and she was just like a fantastic actor. But the end of it was, it was a true story based on a true story of the director's life. And the last shot of the film was a text that the director actually had sent several years ago to this man. It's about a woman who, a daughter whose father is kind of a deadbeat dad, and she reaches out to another person on Facebook with the same name, and it turns out to be a different guy, but they form this friendship. And it's really touching. My point is that it's really easy to get caught up in the technical side of things, or as a writer, I think about structure all the time and pacing. And when I watch movies, sometimes I'm watching pacing happen, or I'm like kind of watching a movie as a writer. And it's important to notice from time to time that sometimes, like if a film can have all kinds of flaws, but if it has like heart, there's something that just comes through the screen that's just so undeniable in that case. And that was a great reminder for me to not get so lost in the weeds about structure. And I'm thinking about this for like this script I wrote, Ruby and the Side-by-Side for Randa, because I'm just like, there's no end to trying to improve a script,
right.
But at some level you'd have to be like, trust this story and be like, I like this story. I like these characters. I like where this goes. Just because you have a perfectly structured script, which doesn't exist, it doesn't even mean that you're going to make a good movie out of that. There's all kinds of things that can go wrong. So it was just something I realized at South by watching other award-winning films. But if you get a chance, you should watch it. I'm just so grateful to you for spending some time and having this conversation. I learned a lot, not the least of which was the actual terms of people that do which things on the set. So
I'm always good for that. Just call me Lexicon.
Well, I hope that we get to work together in some kind of creative capacity again soon.
That'd be great.
And I look forward to our next hang.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bailey. Hey, thanks for watching. Go ahead and click here to like and subscribe. You can click right there to watch another video, or click here to watch a playlist featuring the songs of the Morse Code podcast. Okay, thank you very much.